the podcast, So Casted. I'm your host, Tara Lockett. On today's episode, we will discuss the topic self control. We have a very special guest, Mr. Viren Velacheri. Welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
It is definitely a pleasure to have you here. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So first off, I know Tara from Toastmasters. And just a little bit about me. I just graduated in 2022 from UT Austin, computer science. Already been working almost 2 years, software engineer. But outside of that, outside of work, you could say I have an eclectic array of interests. I love to read, cook, travel, also into part-time modeling and acting. But one of the main reasons why I'm on the podcast today is that I enjoy talking and speaking, hearing other people's views, sharing my views, and I hope to one day start my own podcast. And I thought no better way than to get on a podcast myself and see how it is.
And gain that experience, and you'd be a perfect podcaster. We're going to go ahead and get into this topic. Excuse me. You ever wonder why it's important to remain calm? A scientific fact about anger. Anger triggers the body's fight or flight response. Other emotions that trigger this response include fear, excitement, and anxiety. The adrenaline glands flood the body with stress hormones, such as adrenaline and cortisol. I have 3 questions that I want to talk to you about today, and if you're ready, we'll go ahead and get into those questions.
Sure, that sounds good. Let's dive in.
Let's dive in. The first question, why is self-control so important?
It's very important, especially in the society today, when it's not just about your in-person interactions, but even online. So it's not just, we think the classic in-person, someone says or does something, and typically we think of it in the way of it annoys you to a point that you may respond in a not so appropriate way that can have lasting consequences. But that also extends to social media. There's someone writes a comment, says something, does something that makes you want to write a incendiary response that can get into trouble and, again, lasting consequences. So self-control is huge in today's world. It can be the difference. It all takes a split second. If you don't have that, it can lead to some things that you'll regret for a while. But to try and add some light and keep it positive, it can also be something that leads to great outcomes down the line if you just have the self-control and overall composure to come up with a good response, appropriate one that will be good for you.
Yes, sir. I agree with that. It took me a few years to catch on to the importance of not being so angry. But I think also you have to go to the seed of what's causing you to be angry, which leads me to this next question for you. When is self-control needed?
Yeah, you kind of insinuated where it is most needed. It's definitely in those situations when you're angry. Typically, it's something that someone does something to you. It could be just something in general, but let's say, for example, you're driving on the highway and someone just cuts off right in front of you, and your first, instinctively, your response is to maybe flip them off or do something else that, again, not a very positive response. As the person that did that, are they wrong? Absolutely. But if you come with such a response, you can make the situation even worse, increase the turmoil, and that's how we have this thing called road rage that happens. It starts off like that, and We see those consequences I referenced earlier can be very, very bad and devastating for both. So again, that's where it's most important in those situations where your first instinct is to kind of answer back in a very angry fashion that, if you don't check yourself, can be a real problem.
It really can. And I've had my share of, doing something I shouldn't done, have done, but a person chased me off the freeway, and that really happened. So I get what you're saying, and it is very important for us to maintain that self-control even in a situation like that. Or if a person not just cuts you off, but if they're on their phone in a full conversation on a freeway. That's the one that gets me. That's the
Hmm.
frustrating one for me, and I have to practice what you're telling me to do today. I see you as a pretty calm person. I think that your demeanor shows, you have that ability to be extremely calm in stressful situations. My third question: how do people process the layers of anger? Remember, there's layers of anger, there's layers of frustration, and then the lack of control. What are the steps to controlling yourself?
It's a great question. It's a pretty deep one. As you talk about the layers of anger, frustration, how do you control that? And it really varies from person to person. I think you have to find what works best for you. And I think overall, just from a high level, the first step is to identify the problem. It's basic, but some people aren't really aware of their inappropriate responses in these situations. And the first step is to develop that awareness in the first place. Be aware of this issue and how at times in situations that make you angry and how you don't respond in the best way, that you at least are aware of that. And that's the first step. And it's a very important one.
Mm-hmm.
From there, you have to think about the different things that bring you peace personally. Like what makes you be calm and composed, I think is the thing that is important. For me personally, for instance, I've been doing meditation. That's something I've gone into recently every morning, 10 or 15 minutes. And in general, that's really helped in my, so to speak, calm state, being calm. And even situations that I get into that normally provoke an angry response. Everyone has had their moments of regret, but now, with a different perspective, being more calm overall, I take a step back and think before just responding instinctively. I think that's the thing. And it varies, like I said, person to person. It could be meditation, maybe yoga, just anything that makes you happy, brings the situation into perspective. I think that's the big thing. A lot of times in the moment, it seems worse than it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to take a step back, just take a second and gather yourself to see that. Like, for instance, going back to the road rage example, thinking about, okay, this person, what they did was wrong. There's no denying that. But then if you take it to step back and say, if I respond in this way of honk, or I guess maybe it depends on the situation, but some people go to really extremes. They flip off and you don't know how that person to respond. And then that's how accidents, violence happens. So thinking about, okay, if I do this, is it really going to help in any way? And the answer 9 times out of 10 is no.
Right.
In fact, it's going to make it worse.
Right.
So now you think, okay, if I just don't respond that way, just let the person go by and just maybe change lanes, avoid that person. Now you've got yourself out of a potentially bad situation. So I think it's just having that thing of taking a step back, and seeing, which is really important, just gathering yourself. And yeah, I think in general, you got to kind of experiment. And it varies, some situations, depending on the situation itself. Some things will really hit deeper home than others. So you got to find different ways to manage those situations. So it's just about trying, thinking of different things, seeing what works best, and a little trial of error, and you'll get better and better.
That is true. Well, I say a lot of trial and error. Some people do have to me, I think the freeway is a minor example as opposed to the major where it gets a little more physical and abuse. But nevertheless, it's something that we have to maintain control. Yes. And it's also extending that mercy to the other individual because you really don't know what that individual is going through.
Exactly. Perspective again, thinking that, again, like you said, the road example I gave is a minor one for sure. But still, the analogy remains that that person that cut you off, maybe they're in a real rush.
Yeah.
So that's why they did it. They didn't do it just to make you angry. A lot of people's, we judge them kind of based strictly on their action, and we forget about what their intention was or what they're trying to do. We don't do stuff just for no reason, at least 99%, I would say, the time. So thinking again, like, hey, maybe this person was in a rush. So, okay, not the best way to go about it, but I let that person go because maybe they have something they really have to get to. They're running late, or they have to pick someone up. Maybe they have a kid. You don't know. Yeah. We don't know these people. And, I mean, we're talking about strangers. Even some of people we think we know, we don't fully know. So we're talking about just a stranger. You don't know. So again, it's important to think what their idea behind doing what they did, I think, is, again, very, very important.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to conclude the show, but before we do, I would like to know if there's anything else that you would add.
Yeah, I think we talked about quite a few things. So just for anyone that's listening in, of course, some high-level takeaways, I think, for self-control. I think the first thing is being aware of your emotions, particularly in the situations that make you angry, and evaluating how you go about that, how you can get better, improve, I think is a first step, and it's a very important one. And then the second thing from there is figuring out the best ways to respond better in the situations in a more appropriate manner. And you're going to have to, again, mention some things in terms of maybe taking a deep breath, trying to be calm. But it really varies from person to person. Maybe you have to think about certain images or past experiences in your life. It really depends. So there's no concrete answer like that. You're going to have to dig into that yourself and try some trial and error. And again, I think one thing that wasn't mentioned, maybe it's implied, but just to make it clear, is that these changes don't happen overnight.
Right.
It's like anything that you typically want to get better at, it's a process.
Yes.
So you have to be patient. When you try to make these changes and still feel like you're going nowhere, give up. That's the worst thing you can do. Stick with it. Have a positive mindset from the start. The fact that you even are aware of the situation, aware of this problem of how you sometimes, or how you at times inappropriately respond in these angry situations, itself is a plus. You're already taking that first step. So now from there, just be patient. Try these different things they think will work for you. Evaluate. Mark the progress. Be positive overall. And you'll get to where you want to be. There's no doubt. So just have that patience. Have that progressive mindset. And you'll be good.
Perfect. I like something you just said is mark the progress. Make sure you are giving yourself credit, first of all, for acknowledging if you realize there's something that you do need to work on in regards to your self control, because every individual is responsible for themselves. And before I conclude, I wanted to give you a quote from Lao Tzu. He is a 5th century BC ancient Chinese philosopher, and he states, "You are controlled by the one who makes you angry." And it is not our job to control one another, so it is important for us to have our own self control. I'd like to thank you for listening. I'd also like to thank my guest, Mr. Viren. Thank you for being a part of this program.
Likewise.
Be sure to leave a comment. I'd like to hear from you, and be sure to subscribe. If there is a topic that you want to discuss and you want to talk about it here on SoCasted, please hit my email up. It's studio13socasted@yahoo.com. Again, that's studio13socasted@yahoo.com. I am your host, Tara Lockett. Until next time, take care of your mind. It matters.